Hello and welcome to the QA Underground. Today's going to be a continuation of our previous video on contract testing. Today we're going to focus on how we handle GraphQL queries using PACT. In our previous video, we set up PACT using a regular REST request. And today we're going to focus on how we would handle GraphQL queries using PACT because it's handled a little bit differently. So in our previous video, we went through the PACT contract testing workflow. We walked through the concept of having the consumer and the provider, and also setting up the mock provider for the consumer tests, which would allow the consumer to send a request to the mock provider and have that request be verified by the mock provider and send an expected response back to the consumer. Once that occurs, then we would upload to the PACT broker the contract. And on the provider side, then the provider would then consume that contract. The contract would then be used to send a request to the provider. The provider side would then verify the contract and send results back to the PACT broker. So if we look at our setup for the PACT on the non-GraphQL interaction, it's very straightforward, right? We set up our request, our expected request, then we set up our expected response within the add interaction. When looking at setting up a GraphQL interaction, it's a little different. The first thing we need to do is we actually need to require the GraphQL interaction interface. We then need to create a constant identifier that will use our GraphQL interaction interface. Inside here, we're allotted a new variable in with query. This is where we'll actually be able to pass our GraphQL query within our request. And then the response section is the same as it was before when we were doing non-GraphQL interactions. The big difference here is that we have that with query. Now, when we actually set up our provider and we add our interactions, we will then pass our constant GraphQL query that we created previously to set up our contract. So as you can see, setting up GraphQL with the PACT requires some different steps to be taken, but overall it's not too difficult. All you need to do is require the GraphQL interaction interface and utilize that when setting up your consumer tests. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this video. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.